Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the Elder Law Hour with Emily Hicks.
I'm Emily Hicks, and you're listening to the Elder Law Hour, where we're offering insights and solutions for today's seniors so you can age with confidence. In today's show, we are going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of choosing an in-home healthcare company. And we're talking with Sean McHale, who is the owner of the Jacksonville-based home healthcare company, St. Michael's Home Care. And he's going to be offering us a lot of insights on that. And then we are diving into some celebrity estate battles that have been going on in recent news. And as a ending, we're going to be answering questions about becoming the executor of someone's will and the responsibilities that you take on when you become an executor. But first, in the spirit of talking about celebrities, I came across an interesting article about a famous singer that may be in some hot water. And I'm talking about Katy Perry, who is the famous singer. She has found herself entangled in some legal disputes with some elderly homeowners in California. Now, this has led to a proposal of a potential law known as the Katy Perry Act, and this is not a good claim to fame for her. The Katy Perry Act. Now, let's just say this isn't an official act or anything like that. This is just a proposed act. And it's also referred to as just the Perry Act. It aims to address the issue of elder financial abuse, especially concerning property and real estate sales and transfers that are going on out there. So according to its supporters, the act introduces a 72-hour cool-down period where either party involved in the contract for the sale of a personal residence where one party is over 75 years old can cancel the agreement without any penalties. So they're proposing that there be a 72-hour cool-down period after you enter into a purchase and sale agreement to sell your home. The act's name cleverly references the singer, but they've also created it's also an acronym, and it stands for Protecting Elder Realty for Retirement Years Act. So, the Perry Act, it hasn't undergone any legislative processes yet and is supported by those opposing Katy Perry in her current real estate legal battle, but it does enjoy some bipartisan support. So numerous state representatives and assemblymen, senators, primarily from New Mexico and Texas, have signed in support. The others that are on board with this are from Arkansas, California, Kansas, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, New York, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, and Wyoming. So we'll see if this gets any traction. So what exactly is this? How did she get involved? Well, it looks like she's been involved in several legal disputes. They've created a website that's dedicated to the act, and this website is citing instances of predatory acquisition, unfair dealing, or elder financial fraud. And one of the most recent high-profile cases involves 84-year-old Carl Westcott, who filed a lawsuit to halt the sale of his Santa Barbara, California home to Katy Perry and her fiancé, Orlando Bloom. Westcott alleges that he lacked the mental capacity to understand the nature and probable consequences of the contract. He was diagnosed with Huntington's disease in 2015. He purchased the home in May of 2020 with the intention of living there for the rest of his life. However, when he was presented a contract from Perry and Bloom shortly thereafter for $15 million, he engaged in that contract. So before signing, he says he had undergone a 6-hour back surgery on July 10th. So they presented the contract on July 14th. Obviously, we don't know, they probably, I'm assuming, did not understand the circumstances of which, he was recovering from this surgery. But nevertheless, he had undergone that back surgery. And at the time of entering the contract, he was in pain, experiencing post-surgical delirium, dealing with the dementia from Huntington's disease, and under the influence of pain-killing opiates. prescribed by his physicians. So he is alleging that he did not really understand what he was getting himself into, and he had undergone the surgery and is, backing out of that contract. Now, prior to the Westcott case, Katy Perry also faced legal challenges involving elderly property owners when a group of nuns attempted to prevent her from purchasing their California estate. And it looks like, intended to sell it to someone else. And I guess she became interested in it back in 2013. Then in 2017, she won the right to buy the convent, but needed to find a replacement for the convent's house of prayer before she could proceed. She failed to secure one, and her option to purchase the property expired in 2019. What made this case, I think, really notable was, tragically, during the 2018 trial, one of the nuns collapsed and passed away in court. So I'm sure that was quite the scene. So why is this act being proposed? It's being driven by concerns surrounding her real estate disputes, as well as other contested real estate transactions involving elderly individuals. So basically, the supporters are looking to point to examples where elderly people have perhaps sold their homes for below market value. And it's highlighting the absence of laws protecting senior citizens from real estate transactions that may target older individuals with compromised mental capacities at the time of sale. And it's also drawing attention to the rising trend of online fraud targeting seniors and an increase in complaints related to elderly fraud. In 2020, individuals aged 60 and older filed over 93,000 fraud complaints with the Federal Trade Commission, reporting losses exceeding $500 million. So that's quite a lot of losses. And additionally, cognitive impairment and dementia affect approximately 15% of individuals by age 75 and 20% by age of 80. So the act is really looking to help, protect our seniors from being taken advantage of in these real estate transactions. The case that served as the catalyst for this is undoubtedly a really, really sad one for everyone involved, including Katy Perry, who I'm sure never even dreamed of becoming associated with this real estate controversy involving elderly individuals. However, there it is. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep you up to date with the Katy Perry Act or the Perry Act, and definitely see how that unfolds in the future. So you're listening to the Elder Law Hour, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Elder Law Hour. I am so excited to have Sean McHale as a guest today. He is the owner of St. Michael's Home Care. And Sean, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Emily. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. We are talking about home health care today, and let's dive into the topic of finding an in-home provider. So this is something that comes up a lot for people who, have a loved one, perhaps a spouse or a parent who is declining physically and perhaps needs some help in their home. And they want to stay home, obviously, because everyone wants to stay home as long as possible, right?
Yeah, right. You're right.
And so, let's talk about that process. So when you are looking for an in-home care provider, what is that process like? First of all, how would someone find you?
Well, I think that oftentimes nowadays there's a lot of people, if they're looking for an agency, they will go online and just find some people. I don't think that's the best way to do it, but I do think that if people are looking for an agency, they definitely should meet in person with at least 2 to 3 agencies, and talk to them and really sit down and understand what kind of program that they have. But whoever it is that you may be reaching out to, you have to make sure they are licensed by the state of Florida, they are bonded and insured. Those 3 things are critical, and you need to have them show proof. It's an easy line for people to say, hey, yeah, we're licensed, bonded, and insured, but have them show it, verify that they've got that information.
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing when you're talking to agencies, probably the most important question is, are their employees W-2 employees or are they 1099 independent contractors? And
Oh, interesting.
there's a huge difference. And with the W-2 employees, employees are covered by the agency's workers' compensation insurance. So it's a big protection for those people that are receiving the care, that if a caregiver came in and slipped and fell or they hurt their back lifting somebody, if they're an employee, that becomes a workers' compensation claim and they can't turn around and sue the individual. Whereas if a 1099 independent contractor, they're legally supposed to be carrying their own personal insurance, but oftentimes, Emily, they don't. And if you get someone who is a 1099 and they come in and they hurt themselves, they could turn around and sue that elderly woman, and
Oh
that's the
gosh.
worst thing that could possibly happen. Um,
That's a terrible scenario for sure.
so I always tell people that as long as you're talking to an agency who is licensed by the state, bonded, insured, and has W-2 employees, you should be in pretty good shape. So I would try to steer clear of those 1099s. And I will promise you, most agencies, if you don't ask them that question directly, they will not tell you.
Yeah.
So because they don't want you to know they've got 1099 employees or independent contractors. So definitely asking those questions.
That
But when
brings up
you're,
that
I'm
brings up
sorry,
a
go ahead.
host of things in my mind as an attorney of, oh my gosh, thinking of, oftentimes in that stage of life, home repairs aren't always at the top of the list. So there could be all kinds of issues just, with the home that could create that kind of scenario. That would be a nightmare. A lot of times people just aren't, maybe they're not able to afford hiring a contractor to come in and repair your house is like, I don't think anyone ever enjoys that. And, also it's just maybe they don't even know it's there. So yeah, I could see that being a really big risk. And that's something that I'm actually going to start alerting my clients to. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I think that's extremely valuable information.
Sure.
So
And oftentimes people will tell me that, hey, I'm thinking about maybe going with an agency, but I also have this friend of a friend who helped out my neighbor's mother, and they may be able to come in as a private person and be a caregiver.
right.
And that can be a difficult predicament to be in. There's certainly pros and cons to both, whether you go with an agency or you go with just a lay person that can come in and help out. I think ultimately you have to trust your gut. You have to, the old mantra of you can size somebody up within the first 10 seconds of meeting them. It's true. So I think that if you're meeting somebody who may be coming in to work with your mom or dad that used to, it maybe they're a caregiver that just help out individuals and you just pay them directly. You just have to make sure that it's somebody that you feel comfortable with. So definitely meet that person and make sure they know what your expectations are, and what kind of services that you're looking for. Again, with somebody who isn't insured, you still run that risk of something happening where they may turn around and sue you, or probably the most common issue is if that person who's coming in to help out your mom gets sick or goes on vacation,
Yeah.
who's going to fill in?
Who's your
And
backup? Yeah.
so with an agency, you have that backup, or they should have those backups in place to where if somebody called out or had some time off, they certainly can get another person to come in so you're not left without care.
Right. And also, just knowing that the employees of an agency are going to be properly trained in those scenarios too. Because I've had this situation with a client who wanted an in-home person. This is in another town. So it's in a small town where they weren't happy with the agency that they were using. And I referred a couple of people that I knew did that type of thing. And they luckily they're extremely happy with the lady because she was a in-home care provider for actually my husband's family for years. And so she was vetted, as far as we were concerned. We've known her for a very long time, and she's always done a great job, and they're very happy with her. But there is no formal contract there as far as like formal training. I mean, I knew that she had experience based on his family and what they went through. But honestly, I mean, you don't really know. I mean, people can say a lot and fluff up a resume, but you don't really know what type of training is really there, correct? I mean, when you're
Correct.
yeah.
You're right. And so with any license, we're licensed as a home health agency here in the state of Florida. And so there's certain requirements that we have to have, whether we want to or not. So with an agency, a home health agency, we're required to have either home health aides or CNAs, and we have to go through training. We have a nurse on our staff that conducts training. And then every year we're required to do annual training. So we have to bring those individuals back, whether they've worked for us for a year or 8 years. And we still have a training segment that they have to show that they are competent in those activities of daily living, helping somebody lifting, transferring, bathing, dressing, grooming, those sorts of things. Now, the lay person that is a family friend of a friend to come out, you won't get that. You may have to take their word for it, or but again, some of those people are just fantastic caregivers. Some of those individuals, I'd like to say, were just born to be a caregiver, and those are the best caregivers. If you find someone like that, I say hold on to them, and keep
they're
them.
in a lot of demand.
They certainly are.
They usually have a waiting list, right?
And any agency that really is worth their salt will understand if you have a family caregiver that, hey, this caregiver's been working for my mom for 5 years, and my mom loves her, but she can only work 5 hours, 3 days a week. But mom needs a little bit more care. So if it really is to the agency's benefit to keep that family caregiver there, and we can supplement the care around that family caregiver, because again, we're all on the same team. We all want to have what's best for that individual. And if it's have that family caregiver there, it's an advantage to us to where we can get some information from her. Hey, tell us about the routine. Tell us what she likes. Tell us what she doesn't like. So our caregivers can be better prepared and keep that consistency of care. So then everybody's happy.
Yeah, and I do see that being the problem a lot of times is they just don't have that much time. They're not able to provide full-time care. Maybe, and that was the case, with this person that I was just mentioning. I mean, she, had maybe 3 days a week, and that doesn't always work when you need full-time. And then certainly, if someone needs someone to watch them overnight as well. I mean, there's a lot of instances where there's 24-hour care, right? So that's going to take a team of people.
It does take a team of people, but again, we try to keep consistency of the care and good communication. Now, whether you've got 24-hour care with an agency or care with a friend of a friend that's coming out, you as the family member, as maybe the son or daughter, you've got to be able to make sure that you have that level of trust with that person or people, and you've got to have good communication. You've got to make sure they communicate with you on what's happening with mom or dad, or did we have a fall, or are we feeling sick, or did the doctor change medications? You want to make sure that your caregivers are communicating with you about that so you can be up to speed, because you don't want to have a caregiver come in there and take over, so to speak. And I've seen some of those situations where a family caregiver really takes ownership and starts to shut the family out of what's happening, saying, well, you don't know what's best for your mom. I've been working for her for years and you never come to visit, so I'm just going to take over. And that can be a scary position to be in as a family member, but it happens. So important to keep those communication lines wide open and keep everybody on the same page with what's happening with mom or dad. So that way everybody's in the clear, and there's no uncertainty out there.
Absolutely. And, that brings up just another issue of, the oversight. So, just making sure that there's with an agency, there are checks and balances in place. They have to account for themselves, right? I mean, and with a private person, I mean, that could be just one of the cons of having someone is just, it's up to the family almost to take on the role of employer and to provide that structure and, ask them what's going on, make sure that everything is being done the way it needs to be done, right?
You're right. You're right. And with an agency nowadays, we're required to do something called EVV, which stands for electronic visit verification.
Oh,
So it uses the GPS coordinates of the caregiver's cell phone. So we know exactly when somebody has arrived at someone's house and departed someone's house. So
oh, wow.
they can't be over at the Starbucks having a cup of coffee and say, "Oh yeah, I just clocked in and work with your mom." So there's certainly some checks and balances that agencies have. Our caregivers are required to fill out daily care notes that we can send to family members instantly, right after a shift is completed, so they know what took place. That's an advantage of having an agency. A disadvantage, of course, with the lay person that comes in. You may not have that, but again, if you're playing that role of employer, I would definitely recommend to set something like that up. So those
Absolutely.
caregivers know that there's oversight, that you are still in charge and they are still working for you.
Absolutely. And I could see that being really important to stay on top of symptoms as well, staying on top of, new things that are arising, because, things can change daily, with someone who has one of these progressive diseases that could, it could escalate very quickly. And a lot of times, things go unnoticed until it gets to the point of hospitalization. And that's something that we all want to avoid as much as possible. So I can see how, if you have someone at home that you're a private person that you're using, just make sure you have that structure in place and that oversight in place with them. Also make sure they have the appropriate licensing, their own insurance, to help protect yourself from being sued if something were to happen to them in the home. With the agencies, you gave us some great questions to ask. Make sure that they have W-2 employees rather than 1099 employees, so that, again, if something happens at home, you're protecting yourself from a potential lawsuit. So I think this has been just extremely valuable information. Thank you so much for talking us through this process, because I know it's a big hurdle for people in this situation. And I think this has been just a really wonderful segment on how to find an in-home care provider. So Sean, thank you so much. And if our listeners need your services, how can they get in touch with you?
Best way to reach us is just to go online. stmichaelshomecare.com is our website. You can also just Google St. Michael's Home Care, and that's probably the easiest way to reach us, and we'd be happy to help.
Thank you so much for being here. This was great.
Thanks, Emily.
Welcome back to the Elder Law Hour with Emily Hicks, and I am here with Brittany Darling from Emily Hicks Law, and today we are talking about celebrity estate battles and all of the fun details about who has died and what have they done and how they could have maybe done it better. So Brittany, I'm going to kick it off over to you, because I know you're going to get us started on this.
Yes, we have some exciting celebrities to talk about today. We are going to get to Aretha Franklin. We're going to talk about Prince. But first, we are going to talk about our favorite comedian, Robin Williams.
I love Robin Williams so much. I mean, I thought it's amazing, Well, I actually read something kind of interesting about him that, everyone assumed when he committed suicide, it was depression and, drugs and all of these other things. But I read,
Right.
and I don't know if this is true, but I read that he actually had been diagnosed with Lewy body dementia.
Interesting.
Yeah. And that he did not want to live with that and go through what you have to go through and with that disease, because that's a particularly terrible disease, how it manifests in your brain and your body. It's really truly awful. And so I'd read that he had gotten that diagnosis, and that most likely contributed to why he committed suicide, which I thought was really, really interesting, because everyone, with celebrities, you always just assume it's like an alcohol, drug, or usually drug problem, depression. I mean, it was just hard to imagine him being actually depressed, because he was hilarious,
Right. Right. And, for someone like him who has built his career on being funny and being witty, to know that you're going to decline cognitively over years is got to be so difficult to come to terms with. I totally get that. Maybe this was one way of him kind of escaping his diagnosis in a way.
Absolutely. I think too, the idea of putting your family through it is really, really hard for people, because you just don't know what to expect. You don't know how it's going to go. And a lot of people don't want to they feel like they would be a burden, and they don't, that's the last thing they want to do. I hear that so often with clients. They say, just take me out, take me out if something. And I'm like, we can't do that.
No, you can't do
I
that.
know that, it happens with animals, but people are quite different, and the law does not support that.
That's right. That's right.
So, but
So,
anyway.
so Robin Williams passed away in August of 2014.
Okay.
And his family were in disputes for about a year and a half after that over some personal property. But first, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on
Okay.
Robin Williams and his particular situation. And then I would love your opinion, Emily, on maybe a couple of things that he could have done differently with his estate to kind of alleviate some of those battles over his estate.
Okay, let's do it.
For listeners who don't know, Robin Williams was on his third wife when he passed away. So his first wife, they were married for approximately 10 years. They had one son together, Zachary. His second wife, they were married for about 21 years, and they had 2 children together. And when he and his third wife got married, this was in 2011. They were only married for a few years before he passed away. So he did not have children with this third wife, and her name was Susan. So,
okay. So I mistakenly thought that they had a child together, but that's not true. So his third wife, they had no children. Okay.
No, and I don't know if she had children from a previous marriage, but none of the research that I did showed that she had children from her previous marriage. So we're just going to go with the Robin Williams had 3 children from her previous marriage, and then his third wife, Susan. So at the time of his passing, he actually did have an estate plan.
Oh.
And by all accounts, it was a pretty decent estate plan. He had a will. He had a trust, but as everybody knows, if you're not super detailed in those documents, there can be some trouble. So, so he planned for his third wife to stay in their home, and he planned for his trust to take care of the house and all the maintenance of the house for Susan, and then all of his other property went to his 3 children. So, Emily, if you had to guess what they argued over, what do you think it was?
Well, with celebrities, it's really tricky because, I mean, not only do they have like vast estates and stuff like that, but, as far as like, properties, money, all of that, cash, investments. But, one of the things that always comes up for me when I think about them is like the rights to their likeness and, intellectual property rights. But I don't think that's it. I think it's no. So it sounds like to me what he did was he left her a life estate in the home, which means he didn't actually I don't know if he owned the home and they lived together. I don't know the details of the purchase, but it sounds like maybe he owned the home previously, or he bought it, without her being on title, because if she was jointly titled, then it would just be hers and the kids would be
That's correct.
out of luck. So it sounds
Right.
like he left her a life estate in the house and until she passes. So she's kind of like, that's all she's got really, is just the right to live there until she dies. Which means that she doesn't really own the property.
Correct.
She just owns an interest. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming all of the stuff in the house then she can use, but maybe she doesn't have title to a lot of that personal property.
Yeah. So you're exactly right, Emily. So according to documents, she was allowed to keep the contents of the home and certain other possessions, but the majority of his belongings were directed to go to his 3 children. And these are things like clothing, memorabilia, jewelry, but as you can imagine, it doesn't exactly define what exactly these items are. So
everybody's fighting probably.
Yes, there's definitely some disagreements between Susan and the children about who gets what and what constitutes as contents of the home, and then what is memorabilia.
Yeah.
What clothing of his is it? Was it just his personal shorts and t-shirts that he was wearing, on his normal wardrobe? Were they costumes from being on set? How do you draw the line on what goes to what person, Emily? And this might be a good question for you.
Yeah.
How specific do you need to get in your will and your trust as far as what goes where?
Well, I think the first question that you need to ask yourself is, what are your intentions? Meaning, are your intentions for the family not to fight after you pass? Are your intentions to be that clear? Because some people come to me and they have extremely clear ideas of what they want people to have. For instance, I had a meeting the other day, and she's a grandmother, and she wants her one granddaughter to have a certain charm bracelet that she has. Okay. That's pretty specific. She had everything kind of allocated and lined up to where she knew she wanted this person to have this and that person to have that. And that's, in my experience, that's not always the case. I mean, most people just say, oh, just let them divide it up however, because a lot of times you just don't really know what you're going to have. I mean, in Robin Williams' case, he had planned this whole thing. So, unfortunately, the language in the will wasn't very clear, but who really knows? Who really knows what his intentions are? I mean, that's where it fails, right? If he wanted, he won Oscars, right? Didn't he win like Oscars and Academy Awards? All kinds of things, right? So yeah, who gets that stuff? Who I would assume, I mean, just off the cuff, I would assume that he would want his kids to have them, but what kid and which award? And I mean, there's just like the kids could be fighting between themselves too. So, if you have stuff like that, what we do to try to alleviate that problem in our practice is, as we have I give people a sheet that basically says what the asset is and who you want the beneficiary to be. If you have really specific things that you want to leave to people, you need to indicate that in writing so that there's not a question. If you don't really care, then you're just leaving it up to the family to kind of decide between themselves. And that can be a little bit interesting sometimes, because people do fight about the craziest things, you just never know what's going to strike a chord for people, or what, I've had families fight over curtains and fight over, just like, things that you think are so silly, but for whatever reason, it means something to them, and they're not letting it go.
Yeah.
So
So to wrap this up, I wanted to just say that they did end up settling, and that the children received the vast majority of the items that were in dispute.
she probably got like the household stuff. Like,
She did. It talked about them getting their wedding gifts. So
oh,
that
okay.
strikes me as something, that would make sense, that she would keep the gifts that they got when they got married.
Sure.
Select clothing items, favorite watch of Robin Williams, and they also talk about a bicycle. So
Oh,
in other research I read, it talks about him having a bicycle collection. I might look up a picture of this collection and maybe put it in the notes, because I feel like that might be interesting to see what these bicycles looked like
oh my gosh, who knows what he
that
had?
were worth fighting over.
Yeah, yeah. And who knows? I mean, that could have been something that was just really important and that he really loved. So it's so
What
hard
if they
to
had
know.
matching bicycles?
She's out of luck. The kids get it. That's funny.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I know and people, the hardest part, or I would say the worst thing you can do is really assume that everybody knows what you want, because
Yeah.
that's just not true. And people aren't always, when it all comes down, I mean, people can't help but just advocate for themselves. Like they're just going to advocate for their interests and what they want. So be extremely
Yeah.
clear if you have personal items that
Yeah.
are worth anything, emotionally, or, certainly, monetarily, make sure
Yeah.
you write that stuff down too. And
Yeah. Well, let's talk about another very popular celebrity death recently.
Mhm.
Let's talk about Aretha Franklin. She died
Oh
in
gosh.
2018, and unlike Robin Williams, she did not do much planning.
That
So,
case is a hot mess, because I mean, I remember
did
when
she
it
even
happened.
have a will? Did she have a will, or did she not have a will?
So the whole family, when she died, the whole thing was she doesn't have a will. She's never made a will, blah, blah, blah. That was the whole thing. And then,
Okay.
lo and behold, she did have a will. She made a will, I believe. I mean, the woman, she had pancreatic cancer, right? So she knew this was probably not going to be a life prolonging diagnosis. I mean, like it's
Right.
very, very serious. So lo and behold, they found a will that a handwritten will. Okay. Which is valid. It's valid in Michigan. It is not valid in Florida. Let me just tell you.
Oh, interesting.
Don't go handwriting your will when you get home tonight. But yeah, she had a handwritten will that she did in 2010, I believe, and they found that in a locked cabinet somewhere in her house. So,
Okay.
lo and behold, she does have a will, and she, wrote the terms of that will. I think it was more or less, she had 4 sons, I believe, and it was more or less, distributing. I think she had nominated someone to distribute stuff to them throughout their life. And she had all these conditions. It was kind of funny because she wanted a couple of them to go to business school or something like that. And
Okay.
she had some conditions, she had some ideas about what they needed to do. So I thought it was kind of interesting. But the funny part about it too is that, lo and behold, I don't know how this came about, but so she had this handwritten will that she wrote in 2010. It was signed. I believe it was even notarized. But in Michigan, apparently, you can just handwrite a will as long as it's signed and dated. Don't quote me, but I think that's the law. Then
Okay.
it can be valid. Again, not true in Florida. Anyway, so then somehow someone was rifling through the couch cushions or something one day, and they found another note that purported to be a will. All right. So it said it's her I guess I'm assuming it indicated, I haven't seen the actual, document. Actually, I think you can pull it up online, but anyway.
Here, we'll see if we can find it.
I think, I'm pretty sure you can pull it up because now you can like see anything, but it purported to be her will. And this was written, 4 years later. And then she drastically changed the terms of it. I think she cut one of the sons out. So he obviously
I think you're right. I think it was her oldest son.
Yeah,
You're right.
he was not happy about this will. But anyway, she changed all the terms. She wrote it down. She signed it. I believe, dated it, whatever. It was not notarized. So they went through this whole court battle for God knows how long. And the court ended up ruling that the handwritten couch cushion will was valid. And that's the one that controlled. Is that not crazy?
Oh, this poor child of hers.
Yeah, I'm sure he was not too thrilled. But yeah, I mean, literally in the couch cushions. Like, I don't know. I mean, how does that happen? I'm not really sure because
who knows?
I know the 2010 will was locked in a cabinet. I mean, just kind of like put away where you thought most people would do. But anyway, so yeah, they declared that to be her last will and testament because, as you guys know, I mean, I tell people this all the time, like people will create a will and then they want to change everything or they've moved to another state is a really common thing that's happening now. They've moved to Florida. They want to redo everything. Right. So we'll do another will. And in the will that we do, in the new one, it says, I revoke all prior wills, blah, blah, blah. Because you want to make sure that it's very clear that you're revoking anything that you've done in the past. But where the issue comes up too, I mean, obviously ours are going to be formally, prepared and dated and witnessed and notarized and, all of the things, but it can be confusing if there is more than one out there. So if you've got, I always tell people, just destroy your old one. You don't need it anymore. Just get rid of it, destroy it, tear it up, do something that indicates it is not what you want, just to be 100% clear.
Right.
Because you just don't want to have the question.
That's right.
And then you may not want people to see what changes you made either.
That's right. That's right. Well, let's chat for just a minute about our last celebrity of the day.
Okay.
Prince.
Oh, Prince.
Okay, Emily, did Prince, when he passed away, did he or did he not have a will?
He did nothing. He did not trust lawyers. He did not want to involve them in any way in his affairs. So he did not have a will or certainly not a trust. He didn't have anything in place. I mean, I think he was only 57 when he died. He wasn't, it was, kind of not unusual, but
it is early. I would consider that early.
It's a little early. Yeah.
Most of our listeners who are, between 50 and 60, they're not thinking about, I'm going to pass away in the next 5 years, but life happens, diagnoses happen, and it's time to plan. Yeah.
You just never know. You just really, really never know. He, as I always say, but yeah, so he hadn't done anything. I mean, the thing about that though, to me is the average American that's 57 years old doesn't have a $500 million stay or whatever, I can't remember.
Right. Or a multi-million-dollar Caribbean villa that has to go somewhere.
Exactly. I mean, so the real winner in Prince's estate were the lawyers because
that's right.
I think they made just tens of millions of dollars because of so one thing that I thought was interesting about that too is the absolute chaos that happened once he died. Everyone, all over the place, decided that they were going to try to get their piece of it. And I think they had 45 people claim to be heirs or claim to be, of some relation to him. And so DNA tests were done and just, all kinds of stuff. I mean, so much administration had to happen because of that.
Yeah. So Emily, I have a question, and this is when someone dies intestate, which means they don't have a will.
That's right.
And with someone like Prince, and he had vacation homes, he had massive properties that doubled as a recording studio, and it was a concert venue, and there's music rights, and there's just the catalog of items in his estate were very large, and these items require maintenance. They require maybe a monthly mortgage payment or housekeeping, landscaping, just the basic things that, I think us as average Americans think about when we take care of our home. What happens to those expenses? How do those get paid during this process of figuring out where the money goes?
That's a really, really great question. And something that came up obviously for his estate, because there were quite a few expenses that had to be paid. So what ended up happening was the court appointed a trustee, a corporate trustee, to oversee everything. And they really took over and said, and managed everything. And then of course the heirs, so they narrowed it down to six beneficiaries. And the one was a full sister. I think the others were half siblings. So anyway, the trustee company came in and started overseeing everything. And of course they're doing things to protect the assets and the, beneficiary, well, they were step or half siblings rather. Sorry. They're half siblings. They're pretty mad about what they're doing because they moved some of the music. Because I think with Prince, wasn't it something like he had all of these unpublished songs, and it was the equivalent of something like 30 albums of unpublished songs. I mean, so the estimated value of that was something like $200 million. So what the trustee company did was they moved all of that stuff out of the house and they moved it to a secure location, like out in California or something like that. And it was like climate controlled and all of that because they were really trying to preserve everything. Yeah. And the siblings went absolutely crazy and just, were really, really unhappy that they did that. I think they went through a couple of different trustees, companies as trustees because they just couldn't agree on anything. And they were completely divided. At the end of the day, I think I believe they had to liquidate some stuff so that they could pay for, the maintenance and the ongoing cost of just all of the vast properties and stuff that he had. So, they ended up with a fraction of what his estate was worth. It almost like pennies on the dollar. You know what I mean? It's so sad because all of that could have been avoided. It's just all could have been avoided. Not only that, Brittany, but the estate, when you do no planning, that estate tax, so they lost 40% right off that. 40% is gone. So that's, oh gosh. Talk about poor planning.
It's a lot of money.
It's a tremendous amount of money. And the sad thing is too, Prince, I think, really did support a lot of charities during his lifetime. And, I would imagine, of course, I don't know, I did not know him, but I would imagine that he probably would have maybe wanted to continue that legacy, for himself, and maybe leave some of the money to help others. But, that wasn't done. All they can do is just follow the intestacy laws of, I think we're in Minnesota. So yeah, it just went to his siblings and they ended up with just a fraction of what it was worth. Something crazy low, like $6 million each or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you think about it, an estate worth over 500 million, that's like you said, it's just pennies when you
It
look at the
absolutely,
larger amount.
just absolutely ridiculous. But they couldn't agree. That cost them a lot of money. And then, of course, he was just so high profile. I mean, people came out of the woodwork saying he's their long lost son or daughter or cousin or, anything.
That's right.
It was crazy. But yeah, so I believe that has finally been settled. And I think that they're done. So I'd be interested to see what happens with the music, the unheard music. I'll be interested to see if that gets released or how, the family deals with all of that. And even if I believe they have the rights to it. I think I do think that they did get that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens with that.
Well, if listeners really want to know what's going on with Prince's long lost music, maybe I'll do a little bit of digging and we'll report back.
Okay.
What do you think?
I like that. That sounds really good.
We'll see where it's living now, what climate controlled storage unit it's in.
Who knows? Yeah, it'd be really, really interesting to hear some of that because, gosh, I mean, if it's really and truly the equivalent of 30 albums, I mean, I could not imagine I just can't imagine. So yeah, we'll definitely keep you updated on that. And join us again for some more celebrity estate battles. I'm sure we'll have to do this again sometime soon and just talk about the ups and downs and the crazy things that happen when you fail to plan. So Brittany, thanks so much for setting all that up because that was really interesting. And I think we can all learn a little something from even people with vast estates, don't even have their stuff together sometimes. So
Yes.
But yes. So you've been listening to the Elder Law Hour with Emily Hicks. Thank you so much, Brittany, for being with me today. And we will catch you later on another segment. Welcome back to the Elder Law Hour with Emily Hicks. And I like to end the shows with a question that comes from the audience or someone that has asked me a question throughout the week that I can answer and hopefully provide some value to everyone out there. And this week's question comes from Ben. And Ben is a little bit nervous because he's been named as the executor, or it's really personal representative is what we call it in Florida, but just because everyone knows what executor is, we'll call it executor. He's been named the executor of a will, and he's really nervous about that responsibility, and he wants to know what the basics are, of being an executor and what he'll have to do, when he takes that on. So I put together a little bit of information, just to kind of go over with you about 3 things that you need to know about being an executor. And first of all, an executor is a person or entity that you choose to carry out your last wishes outlined in your will. So your executor is going to be someone that you trust, someone that is responsible enough to manage your estate after you pass away, someone that will carry out your wishes the way that you intend them to be carried out. And it's a really big decision on, when it comes down to choosing who the best executor may be. So what do you need to know about that? What should you consider before you name someone? Can an executor decide who gets what? What kind of power and authority do they have? So in most circumstances, an executor is not going to decide who gets what property, okay? You're going to outline those instructions in your will, but the executor is responsible for carrying out those wishes that are outlined in your will. So the instructions are there. Hopefully it's well written so that everyone knows who gets what, and the executor is charged with making that happen. So, there is an instance where the executor may have to, step in a little bit more, as if the person who made the will, who's called a testator, did not distribute all of their assets in the will, then the executor may be able to decide how to distribute that property. If you have acquired, maybe perhaps you didn't update your will, recently, and you've acquired property that wasn't listed in the will, then the executor may be charged with having to distribute that property. And the next question that he has is, can an executor of a will be a beneficiary too? And the answer to that is yes. An executor can also be a beneficiary of the will, and it's really common. It's common for people to have their surviving spouse or their children act as the executor of their estate, but obviously, those individuals are going to benefit under the will as well. Well, I say obviously, they don't have to, but in most cases, your spouse or your children will, benefit under your will. So that's why they are called beneficiaries. So that choice can be, a cost-effective one if you have a small or a simple estate. And most families that I plan with, they tend to go with a family member that they want to name as the executor. Another benefit of that, of naming a family member as the executor of your estate, is that they're very familiar with you and your wishes. So they know you, they understand how you want the assets divided. If you forget to state where the certain property goes in your will, the executor is most likely to know, where you want to give those assets or who the correct beneficiaries may be in that circumstance. Now, another question that has come up is, how long does the executor have to pay out the beneficiaries? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is really it depends. The executor is tasked with working diligently to get each beneficiary paid as soon as possible. But you really don't know. It depends on the estate and the assets involved. So while the executor is responsible for ensuring beneficiaries receive the money or property they were left in the will, the probate process may delay that. They may delay beneficiaries from receiving the payout, depending on the size of the estate and the debts, and, perhaps there are taxes that the estate owes. It could take anywhere from 6 months to more than a year for a beneficiary to actually receive an inheritance. And if you've ever been through the probate process, you know that it can be a long process. And that's why we, in our planning a lot of times seek to avoid that, because it can be a very, very long process. And that process generally goes, in these stages. The first stage is submitting the will for probate. So part of the executor's responsibility to the estate is to file the will with the probate court. And filing the will begins the probate process. Once you complete that, the beneficiaries will be one step closer to receiving their inheritance. The time the executors have to file the will will vary state by state, but in Florida, it's 90 days within the date of death. So then you'll need to file an inventory, and the inventory of estate assets is required in a probate case. As part of the inventory, the executor determines the total value of all of the estate property, money, and other assets. A completed inventory can then be used by the executor to determine if you are going to owe any federal or state taxes. Now, the estate tax, I'm just going to mention to you, we're not talking about that today, but it is very, very high. So unless you are leaving personal assets in excess of $12.9 million, then in 2023, we're not really going to be that concerned about estate taxes in particular. But, you also have to think about whether or not certain assets will need to be used to settle debts. And the third part of that is paying the taxes and the debts of the estate. Before the executor can distribute any assets to beneficiaries, the debts and taxes must be paid, and the executor is responsible for ensuring that those payments are made. So I hope this has been helpful for you. Please let us know if you have any other questions about this or any other legal topic. Please send us a message on our website, elderlawhour.com. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Elder Law Hour. If you'd like to connect with me or learn more about today's episode, please, again, visit us at elderlawhour.com. I'm Emily Hicks, and we will catch you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to the Elder Law Hour with Emily Hicks. Join us this and every Saturday for the Elder Law Hour with Emily Hicks.